Hey everyone, welcome back to the Yossi Schmidt Show. I'm sorry for the long break, but we are back with the great Mike Davis. Mike, can you please introduce yourself?
Well, thank you for having me on. I'm Mike Davis. I run the Article 3 project, which is in the judicial fight and fighting back against the Democrats' lawfare against President Trump and his top aides and his supporters, his attorneys, parents outraged at school board meetings by gender chaos and the resulting rapes in high school bathrooms, Christians praying outside of abortion clinics. I've been very outraged about what happened on October 7th in Israel, and I'm particularly outraged about the Hamas supporters in the United States who are cheering on the most vile terrorism imaginable, the kidnapping, rape, torture, and murder of women, children, babies, the elderly, the disabled. Over 1,200 Israelis and Americans were murdered on October 7th. There are still hostages. People are being massacred by Hamas, and it really bothers me. So um, we've turned Article 3 project into that fight as well, where we want to push to have these Hamas supporters, their visas revoked, they're uh, thrown out of our country. If they're naturalized citizens, having them denaturalized and get them the hell out of America because they're trash and they need to get the hell out of America because they don't share our Judeo-Christian values. And if you cheer on terrorists, then you're a terrorist supporter. So get the hell out of America. And I also run the Internet Accountability Project, which takes on big tech from the right, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple on data privacy, antitrust, and Section 230.
Wow. First of all, as an Orthodox Jew, I thank you for your support of Israel. When the war broke out, I had a I have a brother there learning in school there, and I had a brother who was there for the holiday. It was the holiday when the war broke out, and that night, he's not going to appreciate me saying this, but as soon as the holiday was over for us, he went down to the Gaza border staging area, and he was handing pizza, giving whatever military items he could to the soldiers. He was one of the first people to do that. Now, a lot more have done it, and my brother's back in Lakewood, New Jersey now. But yeah, so hearing you say that you are fighting Hamas supporters in uh, uh, America really, uh, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well, we need to America and Israel need to stand shoulder to shoulder because it's the only real democracy. Israel's the only real democracy in the Middle East, and they produce good people and good exports, including good technology and high tech, uh, high tech software programs, high tech hardware programs. They're a net exporter of good in this world, as opposed to Hamas, which uses its aid to build terror tunnels and enslaves its people in Gaza and exports rockets into Israel. We need to wipe Hamas off the map so this never happens again. We need to wipe Hezbollah off the map so this never happens again. And we need a strong president back in the White House named Donald J. Trump, because we had peace and prosperity under Trump, and there's no way in hell that these attacks by Russia against Ukraine, by Hamas against Israel, Hezbollah versus Israel and the United States, there's no way in hell this would be happening under President Donald J. Trump. He brought peace and prosperity to the world, including in the Middle East. He was one of the strongest champions of Israel, moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And he was a rock solid president for the state of Israel. And President Biden, unfortunately, is not. And President Biden may pay lip service to Israel, but he has people in his administration who undermine Israel every step of the way, as we saw with Tony Blinken, and undermining Israel every step of the way with Israel's response to October 7th.
So true. Speaking of President Trump, the Iowa caucuses last night. What's your initial response to the results?
Well, I'm from Iowa. I grew up in Des Moines. I was born and raised there. I went to undergrad there. I went to law school there. So I spent about 25 years in Iowa. My family's back there, my extended family, my friends. I'm very familiar with Iowa. I've campaigned in all 99 counties. I've several times. I've worked the Iowa caucuses. And I'll tell you what President Trump did in the Iowa caucuses was truly a feat. He won 98 of 99 counties. He won over 50% of the vote. It was a landslide. And it was when it was a record, we had a record turnout when it was record cold, right? And the only reason Trump only lost one county, Johnson County, which is this liberal enclave where the University of Iowa is housed. That's where I went to my alma mater for undergrad and law school. And it's this little left-wing whack job school. It's not little, it's a big school. It's a Big Ten school in Johnson County. Trump only lost Johnson County by one vote. So he could have easily won 99 out of 99 counties. Haley beat Trump by one vote in the People's Republic of Johnson County. And but it was a remarkable feat by President Trump. He's clearly going to win this primary. He's clearly going to win back the White House. I think these Republicans like DeSantis and Haley and the others need to bow out gracefully and get behind President Trump. So we're not wasting our resources on a feudal primary that Trump's definitely going to win. And we can start focusing our resources on beating President Biden and getting him the hell out of the White House.
So I couldn't agree more that we need to get President Biden out of the White House. And I'm very impressed. Impressed is not the word. Amazed, astounded by what President Trump pulled off last night. It's obvious the people want him back. It's not even a question about it. The people want him back. Like you said earlier, under President Trump, none of these attacks would have happened. So the people want him back. But were you at all shocked by Vivek, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Sorry, no insult. Dropping out and endorsing Trump last night, or you were waiting a couple more primaries?
I thought Vivek would perform more strongly last night in Iowa. I remember, I think it was back in 2000. I'm getting my caucuses mixed up, but Rand Paul's father ran, and he had a surprisingly strong performance in Iowa. And I thought you would get a performance like that with Vivek, where he had really intense support, and they would show up when it was brutally cold. But I just forget that my fellow Iowans are pretty used to cold, and 30 or 40 below temperatures with the wind chill is not going to scare people off, especially Trump supporters. I think Trump supporters would have climbed over glass to go to the Iowa caucuses to vote for President Trump. And I think a big part of why is this Democrat lawfare against President Trump. These two bogus impeachments, these four bogus indictments for non-crimes, these two illegal gag orders, the civil fraud lawsuit for the non-fraud of a businessman paying back sophisticated Wall Street banks on time in full, as agreed with interest. They're trying to just take them off the ballots because all that lawfare backfired. I think the American people are getting pretty outraged that these Democrat prosecutors and these Democrat judges and these Democrat hellholes like New York, DC, and Atlanta think that they get to decide the next presidential election instead of the American people. And I think that's why you saw a lot of people show up in Iowa. There's this lawfare, this Democrat lawfare, this election interference. They thought that they would take out Trump or significantly weaken him for the general election. But all they've done is they've emboldened him. They've made him stronger. They've made him unstoppable.
So speaking about the Democratic lawfare, what's the constitutional or the correct way to respond to removing President Trump from the ballot in Colorado and Maine, I think?
It's not constitutional what the Democrats have done here. It's very illegal. It's very unconstitutional. And I anticipate that the Supreme Court is going to smack down the Colorado Supreme Court very quickly and very forcefully. And I'll tell you what the Democrats are using. Like I said, the two impeachments, the four indictments, the civil fraud for non-fraud, the illegal gag orders, that lawfare, that election interference backfired. And so the Democrats threw this legal Hail Mary. They dusted off this 155-year-old provision out of the Constitution. After the Civil War, we enacted the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution to outlaw slavery, to guarantee equal protection and due process to the freed slaves, and to guarantee voting rights to the freed male slaves. And what was happening after the Civil War is you had Confederates winning elective office, including in the House of Representatives, and they were undermining the Union in the post-Civil War Reconstruction effort. So as part of the 14th Amendment, they added Section 3. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment disqualifies those who engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States during the Civil War from holding office. And there is a case from then Chief Justice Salmon Chase from 155 years ago that in order to disqualify under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment for insurrection or rebellion, Congress has to pass a federal criminal statute for insurrection or rebellion, which Congress did, with a disqualification provision, which Congress included. And if you want to disqualify for insurrection or rebellion, you have to have a U.S. attorney or a federal prosecutor bring federal charges. A grand jury has to indict or approve those federal charges. You have to have a federal jury find the defendant guilty with unanimously guilty with evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. That federal trial judge has to convict, and that conviction must be upheld on appeal. That is the only way you can disqualify under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And Democrats think that they can just have four partisan Democrat justices, operatives on the Colorado Supreme Court in a 4-3 decision, just take them off the ballot in Colorado, right? And that's just not going to fly. It's all seven justices. I live in Colorado and split my time between Colorado and DC. All seven justices out here on the Colorado Supreme Court are Democrats. They're all appointed by Democrat governors. Four of them were so wacky with this ruling that three of their Democrat colleagues wrote blistering dissents, right? So the U.S. Supreme Court took this case. The Supreme Court is almost certainly they're definitely going to slap down the Colorado Supreme Court. It should be 9-0 if the three Democrat appointed justices have any sense of justice and the law whatsoever. But this could be a 6-3 or a 7-2 case. I think Elena Kagan will at least understand how crazy the Colorado Supreme Court acted here by just taking Trump off the ballot, how anti-democratic that is. The Democrats pretend like they're saving democracy by destroying democracy. And the case that's even more egregious is you have this goofball Maine Secretary of State, this unelected, non-lawyer Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, thinks that she can just unilaterally decree that Trump committed an insurrection on January 6th, and therefore he goes off the ballot. Think about what happened on January 6th. January 6th was a lawful protest permitted by the National Park Service that devolved into a riot. How many insurrectionists go unarmed into a nation's capital? How many insurrectionists get to the Senate floor of a nation's capital, walk through velvet ropes, follow police direction, take selfies, and don't burn down the damn place? It was a lawful protest that devolved into a riot. It was not an insurrection. And if it were an insurrection, the Democrats, the January 6th Democrats, and the Biden Justice Department, including Jack Smith, both of which spent tens of millions of dollars investigating January 6th, hunting for evidence of insurrection, would have found that evidence, and they would have charged Trump with insurrection or aiding insurrection or conspiracy to commit insurrection. The evidence does not exist because it was not an insurrection. So the Supreme Court's going to smack down the Colorado Supreme Court. I imagine that the I hope that the Maine courts come to their senses very quickly and smack down the Maine Secretary of State Shenna Bellows and reverse these egregiously unconstitutional republic-ending decisions where you're just going to take the leading presidential candidate off the ballot. If you can't beat him, you apparently impeach him and indict him and bankrupt him and gag him. And if that doesn't work, you just disqualify him. That's just not going to fly. So that's where we are on that. The Supreme Court, like I said, will resolve this quickly, I imagine.
That would be great. Now, I'll tell you what evidence does appear in January 6th. That evidence appears to prove the fact that it was lawful, but it was a peaceful protest that turned into a riot. But big tech doesn't appreciate that because they are in the pockets of the liberals, or they are liberals, either or, and um, they censor conservatives who share proof of everything.
Yeah.
Proof, the actual proof. And they go after them with the FBI. But I want to focus more on the censorship. Because I don't know if you know, I review alternative social media platforms. So I want to hear your take on this alternative parallel economy type of situation that conservatives are trying to build.
Well, it's going to be hard to do, and I'll tell you why. It's because Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple have gatekeeping power over information and commerce in the United States and frankly around the world. These are trillion-dollar big tech monopolists, and they control the internet. And thank God for Elon Musk, who spent $44 billion on this terrible investment called Twitter that's now called X, because otherwise we wouldn't have free speech right now in this country. We would have Twitter and Google and Facebook and Apple censoring, silencing, deplatforming, canceling. The problem with these alternate platforms, it's hard for them to get off the ground. Look what happened with Parler, right? These Democrats who run these big tech, trillion-dollar big tech monopolists said, if you don't like Twitter, build your own. This is before Elon Musk. And so Parler did. Parler quickly got a very big valuation. I think it was like $1 billion valuation. And it was starting to bring free speech online. And so what happened? You had Google and Apple collude to kick Parler out of the App Store duopoly, and then Amazon kicked Parler off the internet. So there goes your build your own argument, where they were able to collude and crush Parler in an instance. Like I said, thank God for Elon Musk, but we can't rely on benevolent billionaires like Elon Musk for free speech in this country. We have to do more than this. We have to update our century-old antitrust laws and break up big tech. The whole point of these antitrust laws, the Sherman Act, the Clayton Act, it's law enforcement. It's not regulation, it's law enforcement. It's the opposite of regulation. You are targeting these anti-competitive tumors on the free market. You're breaking up Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple so we can actually have competition. We can actually have startups like Parler and other parallel social media platforms to which you're referring without them getting crushed, right? And it's important that we do this. We actually, this is the one I've been very critical of President Biden, but I think the one area where I think President Biden is getting it right is with his antitrust law enforcement. He appointed two good people to run the Federal Trade Commission with Lena Khan, and then he picked a very good person to run the Justice Department's antitrust division. And these two antitrust law enforcement officers, the top law enforcement cops or the top antitrust law enforcement cops, are doing a very good job of holding big tech accountable. And they're actually working with Republican state attorneys general and Democrat state attorneys general to finally hold these big tech monopolists accountable. Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. They have too much power, and they use their power to abuse the market, abuse competition, abuse their consumers. And that's why we have these antitrust laws on the books for 100 years so we can target these tumors. You hear Facebook calling for regulations. Of course, Facebook wants regulations because they're entry barriers to startup competitors, and it's a rounding error for Facebook to hire the lawyers and lobbyists and other types of people, accountants. You need to comply with these government regulations. These startup companies can't afford that. So that's why you hear trillion-dollar monopolists calling for regulations. What we need is to update and enforce our century-old antitrust laws and break up Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. Google should not own YouTube. Facebook should not own Instagram. We need to break up these big tech platforms.
We need them to be separate entities, separate companies, separate everything.
Yeah, let me give you an example why. If Google competed against YouTube instead of acquired YouTube, right? When they have this, 90 some percent market share of online search, if they competed instead of acquired, if Google competed against YouTube instead of acquired YouTube, there's no chance that Google would be censoring conservatives and others with whom Google disagrees because they'd be competing for their business. When you don't have to compete for their business, you can abuse them, like censoring them, like deplatforming them, like canceling them. That's what monopolists get away with because they don't have competition.
Makes complete sense. So, but it doesn't look like we're going to get them to be broken up anytime soon, right?
Well, that's not true. We have lawsuits right now in the works, and there's a lawsuit by the Biden Justice Department that's breaking up Google's online advertising monopoly, and that's the silver bullets. Google is the worst monopolist of the four of the big tech monopolists: Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. It's really in that order. And Google is the worst of the worst. And Google gets its money so what everyone thinks, oh, well, we have free Gmail, we have free Google searches, we have free Google Maps, free Google everything. Well, guess what? They're not a trillion-dollar monopolist by giving out freebies. What they do is they give you cheap phones and free programs to use because they are a surveillance company, and they gather as much data as they can on us, including our searches, our movements, what we say, what we hear. They gather as much as they can on each one of us, and they make digital dossiers on each one of us, and then they sell those digital dossiers to advertisers, right? And they control the online advertising market. They control the buy, sell, and trade side of that online advertising market. They are a monopolist with online advertising, right? If you break up that very lucrative online advertising market that Google monopolizes, that is the silver bullet. That's how you break up big tech's monopoly power. That's how you break up Google's behemoth power to control information and commerce around America and around the world. And so the Biden Justice Department, the Antitrust Division, is pursuing that now. The other group I run, the Internet Accountability Project, in addition to the Article 3 project, we strongly support this lawsuit. We have state attorneys general on this lawsuit, including the Virginia State Attorney General, who's a Republican. So it's a very good thing. And if this lawsuit is successful, we're going to go a long way into breaking up Google's online advertising monopoly and therefore their ability to control information and commerce.
Great. So, like I said, there's a silver lining to the Biden presidency.
This is the only thing that I think Biden is doing right, is his appointments of two really good antitrust cops to help him run his two antitrust components in the federal government.
Quick question: does a VPN help save us from bringing the product from big tech?
Well, I don't know if it's the VPN that does it or not, because it's just Google controls search. Google, they have an online monopoly on search. They have an online monopoly on ad tech or advertising. They have a monopoly on a lot of different products in the online markets, right? And that's the issue, is to break up Google's monopoly. I mean, Amazon is also a behemoth, but Amazon has way too much power. You know, they not only do they have the online marketplace pretty well dominated, they're starting to take over like Whole Foods and medicine. Like they acquired Whole Foods, they acquired One Medical, so they have our medical data. You have Apple that controls the half of the online app store duopoly, with Google controlling the other half, so they're duopolist in the online app store duopoly. And these big tech companies just have too much power, and they use that power to break into other product markets. And it's just not a good thing when we have this concentrated power, when you have four companies control so much information and commerce around the world.
Very true. Very true. Thank you, Mike, for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. Hopefully, we can maybe get you on the show another time to discuss more. Guys, I hope to bring back the show more consistently before February 6th. And there'll definitely be a podcast on February 6th.
Thank you for having me.
February,
I really appreciate it.
only good things. And I will see you guys soon.